Hi, everybody. So this is our very last critique for class. This is task 3 of milestone 5, and this is the stage where you were putting on some of your finishing touches, maybe working a little bit more with the values. And so I'll just give you, if I can, a little bit more feedback on any areas that look like they could be developed a little bit more. But so far, when I'm looking at everybody's thumbnails here, I really do see a lot of really time and attention to creating a three-dimensional look to the drawing, which is what we were really aiming for here, is kind of creating that sense of depth and realism that so many people want to have in their drawing, is really kind of creating a kind of something that looks like you really could ideally, like, kind of almost reach out and touch the elements in your drawing. It's so wonderful when that happens. So, okay, let's just get started and take a look at everyone's work. Oh, before we do that, before I forget, I just want to remind everybody that our last day of class is this coming Wednesday. It's right around the corner. And so you can put your final drawings, like your 3 drawings, into the final submission area, and do make sure to include in the comments your response to the questions, as always. And yeah, and take the final exam if you have not done so already. And let's see, anything else? As always, just to let you know, if something happens, and you're not able to get your work into the final submission area, if you have your tasks done, the task parts, which is one of what we're looking at, I will automatically use your tasks to grade your work. So don't worry if something happens, hopefully nothing will, but if for whatever reason something happens, you cannot get your final submission in, then you will get, points for the tasks that you have done. Okay. Hi, Erin. Okay, you have a new appreciation for still life drawings. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, still life drawings really, they're a whole thing, aren't they? And you crumpled your paper. Wow, and you started over. Well, congratulations on doing that. I really think it takes a lot of tenacity to 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 do something like that. First of all, to, get that frustrated, and then to start over. So I think that's really wonderful that you did that. If I could say anything to my younger self, going back to design school, the one thing that I wish I had known, or maybe somebody tried to tell me and I didn't listen, or, it's just maybe one of those things you have at the right time for you to hear it, is that learning design or art, I guess really anything, it really just requires that you be willing to try, to try and make mistakes, and then just keep working. Because and especially, I think, really especially for art and design, there is a really strong kind of, I think, underlying mythology that people who are good at it are just naturally talented. And I say mythology because it really is a mythology, like it's a myth. It's not true at all. People who are good at art and design are end up that way just because they just kind of learn and they practice, and they go through making all the mistakes. And sometimes when you end up in school, like, you think, oh, that person is so much better than me. And most often that person has actually just been taking, they've just been taking classes before. They've learned, or somebody's been showing them how to do these things. It's not something that is just a talent, it's a skill. So if you keep that in mind, I think it really is very useful, like, for becoming better at this, is just keep doing it. And that's going to be the thing that gets you to, develop the skills that you want to develop. And that's true for every little aspect of working in the design field, whether it's, doing a layout, or, designing logos, or taking good photographs. It's just practicing and, you know, kind of navigating through all of the different stages of development. Okay, anyhow, so Erin, Yeah, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that the reflections or the glass was the hardest part for you. And it's interesting that that's actually the most successful, I think, part of your drawing is all the light in here. It really looks like it's just filled with light and, you know, reflections. And just also this label, so detailed. It's just really, I think you did a really nice job on it. Um, this element area in here too is very nice, like the way you've worked on the rounded part of the book, you know, where it's like you've moved from outline to create this entire book with this sense of just shade and shadow. You know, and also you've worked really nicely on the label here. I think labels can be quite hard because we automatically sort of tend to, you know, kind of fill them in based on what we think we see, and then it looks like it's kind of pasted on. But you, to me, it looks like for all of your labels that you were actually really looking at the label, here the graphics here, and this element here, and really trying to just work with the lights and darks and filling it in that way. And that's exactly how you want to make something look realistic. Uh, so I only have maybe just a few very small comments here. Um, One is, I would, you know, this book up here, I would, you know, maybe consider, you know, kind of removing a little bit of the outline here, you know, to kind of make it look more like this. Again, it's going to look different because it's a different value, but what I mean by the same is that you have managed to kind of remove the outlines and move towards um, replacing it with value, you know, a value study. And you've done that really throughout, you know, all of your drawing here. I, you know, the bottle still has a little bit of outline too, but I kind of feel like, you know, with this one, with the glass, sometimes you may get outlines when you have a glass, you know, or kind of some things that are glass-like. So I don't think I would worry too much about that. Oh, and I also noticed too, you've actually managed to really capture the shadows here of the glass, which is all kind of still also based on reflections, and it's, you know, very kind of, you know, luminous, which is very nice. Um, and then maybe the other thing I might do too is I might blend a little bit of this shading down here out, just a little bit. I love what you've done up here with this kind of mottled shading. It almost like it looks very sort of subtle and kind of mottled. So it kind of like makes it seem very much like a background. And I might do something similar here, you know, just on a darker level, just kind of blend it a little bit more so that it gets more flattened out. You know, what happens, sometimes you can get away with like really strong linear lines. You know, like the example of the tutorial, you know, with the chair, the guy who's working on the chair with the bowl of eggs. It's a very strong linear look. But what he's kind of doing is sort of following certain directional, like, ways. I don't know if I'm not going to pull it up right now, but if you look at it, you can see that it's sort of directional following the lines of the different, you know, forms. So it works. But sometimes, you know, if you have too much lines, especially if they're going in slightly different directions on the same plane, it makes it look like it's lifting up, if that makes sense. So you could maybe go and like maybe make it this direction. I think is looking, oops, looking really good. You might go and add some more directions that way, like so it's horizontal, or you might just kind of blend it, make it more blotchy, you know, whichever you want to do. Okay, I think that's it. You know, nice job on this, and again, I really appreciate how you worked through your glass. Brody, all right. Well, you have a still life that is in some ways similar to Aaron's in the sense that you've done a horizontal, um, you know, arrangement, and you have a lot of objects that are overlapping and some sort of, you know, round shapes and rectilinear shapes. And so I would say that in yours, you have also created a really nice study of three-dimensional forms. You know, there's a real strong sense, especially throughout these two elements of that kind of, you know, three-dimensional quality to it. And I would say just kind of keep working on this a little bit more to add more detail, you know, specific qualities to each of your elements. Like, what are these made out of? You know, like maybe there's some detail you could add, some textures. You know, is this, you know, what is this made out of? Is it wood or is it shiny? Is it styrofoam? You know, to kind of give sort of more of a kind of clarity to the drawing. That's the main thing I'd work on, and also maybe kind of blending your shadows out a little bit more. There's a sort of sense of them having you know, a lot of directional quality to it, which again sort of makes them appear not like they're not sitting on the table. Maybe blend them out so they look a little more transparent. Um, and you know, with your background, I like the idea of making it really dark so it goes, you know, really falls back. I would keep blending that too so that, you know, maybe kind of blend out a little bit of the white bits there, which kind of will tend to kind of make it appear like it'll attract our attention when we have such strong contrast. So maybe blending that out. But I think the main thing is just to kind of develop a little bit more, again, a more texture, more detail about what's happening with these objects would be the way to take this from a draft to, you know, a finished uh, drawing. You know, if you'll notice some of the topics that we are looking at this week in the learning path is about textures and detail and you know, adding that part of it, you know, what's happening along these edges, for example, and so forth. All right, okay, well, I look forward to seeing what your final drawing looks like. Okay, so you use charcoal, graphite pencils, good. Charcoal for the dark area, that's perfect. That's exactly, you know, really gives you those nice dark uh, um, values that really do make your drawing pop. It's interesting, you know, it is the kind of combination of the darks and the lights, you know, that it is that range that helps convey that sense of three-dimensionality that we've been working so hard in this class to achieve. You know, you can see that right here in this element here, how, you know, having this entire range of values on there really gives it that strong three-dimensional quality. You know, when I first started drawing, and even today, I tend to, you know, be a little bit hesitant about adding those real darks. I think it's just natural because, oh, it feels, you know, so permanent to add those. But it is what makes, you know, again, it really is what makes the drawing come to life. So the more you can kind of like dive into that, the more it really helps your drawing. So I think that, yeah, you know, things are really coming along here. Again, this still feels very polished and complete, this element in here, and also the lampshade in here. Oh, this whole top area feels very complete, and you know, down through the lamp here. I would say maybe just continue to kind of work on the outlines here, maybe adding a little bit more sharpness here. Maybe you need a little more darks, you know, what something in there. Um, and this is, I think this is much better. What this is right here. I'm still not 100% sure what it is, but I think it's getting more form, more dimensional form. So I might work a little bit more on this one, maybe this area in here, and then maybe a little bit more in here. You know, one thing I'm thinking is like, let's see if I can, you know, I'm wondering, actually that probably doesn't help see it, but, you know, as these sticks get closer in to the container, do they get a little darker? Is there a little bit of darkness sometimes that will happen, you know, as we sort of look into that. So that might be an area of kind of providing a little more dimension. So yeah, those, like this area in here still, I think you could, and this is where again I would work with a little more pencil. Maybe because you've got a lot of detail there, but just adding a little more dark, you know, clarifying it a little bit more. Um, yeah, okay, yeah. Anything else? You know, even this cord is really nice touch here. Maybe that could have a tiny bit of dark on it, like at maybe the very bottom, you know, of that edge, you know, where it's furthest away from us, just to kind of make that pop a little bit. Sometimes, you know, this is where, you know, you can do a little bit of artistic freedom to add a little bit of like dark and light, if, you know, if that will help your drawing. Uh, so that's it. Yeah, I think otherwise, I think really you've done a nice job here creating, you know, and that's what's so interesting about still lifes, you know, and all the still lifes that we've been looking at, Brody, Aaron, and yours, Janelle, and I'm sure more as we go through, is that there's kind of a magic with still life. Like we create as drawers, we create a kind of a world of, you know, looking into this interesting scene, and it kind of like sort of magical, mysterious, or you know, whatever, you know, adjectives you want to add to it, but it does create this very interesting scene that we see that we wouldn't necessarily see from a photograph. You know, it wouldn't convey that. It's the process of drawing something that gives it this really rich kind of, you know, texture, emotional texture, which I just love. You know, it's part of what I like about drawing. Okay. Okay, Taylor. Blending pencil, good. Not to draw with line, very good. Fix the siding, excellent. And do the back of the box, good. Yeah, that's very nice, yes. There's nothing really correct perspective. It's we're doing that in this class because we are doing observational drawing where we're trying to be accurate. But when you're drawing, of course, like you can draw however you like to draw, like, and so sometimes unusual perspective, like if you're, I really like Van Gogh, and if you look at some of his scenes that have perspective in it, he deliberately, alters that perspective to make it look, how he wants it to look, whatever he's trying to convey. So it's not like that's the right way to draw. It just works for this particular style we're doing. Okay, anyhow. Ooh, yeah, I love what you're doing in here. This is very nice all through here. And again, I think what you've done here too with the lettering seems very observational, in the sense that it's got a sort of it's where the light is hitting it, so it looks like it's really kind of blended in to the bottle, which is what happens, I like the shadow and also the shading in the background. Oh, I like what you did here too. This looks much more accurate, moving from line through here as well. Um, and so I would say, the only thing that I probably would, one of the things that I would work on here is this. This may be quite strong in the lettering. Is there any kind of change in the lettering in the sense of light and dark? Do you know what I mean? Like I would really look at that and see, or maybe if there isn't, I might even soften that just a little bit. um, Again, artistic, sometimes you can take artistic license because it seems like maybe it feels like it's a bit pasted on, like kind of floating, instead of kind of melded in to the um, the container like this one is. Not that it has to be this faint, but just, sometimes, you can take artistic license by kind of fading certain parts of the lettering. So so maybe it's strong like this in some places, but a little bit lighter in other places. That can help it kind of merge, with the container. Um, The other thing I might look at just a little bit more is this area in here. Is there, by any chance, any more kind of like lights and darks in there? Like or more darks, like or in between. Is there anything that you can kind of capture in there that would make it look like there's more sort of reflection on it, or to kind of give it more of a sense of shape, like the metal shape on it? Maybe there isn't, and that's okay too, but that might be something to just to kind of look at. And also maybe to underneath the container, is it right here, like you've gotten kind of like this dark areas that are happening under here, which is quite natural under a container. You might start seeing these kind of slightly like darker areas that show where the container meets the table, so maybe that's not there, but that might be something to look at, just again to kind of give this whole form. It's a big, and the reason why I'm sort of looking at this form is it's a large area in your design, and so sometimes those kind of large areas you can sort of pay more attention to kind of give them more, just a little more clarity. Okay, otherwise, keep up the great work, and I look forward to seeing your final drawing. Hey, Courtney, so I have task 2 here and then task 3. So we'll just start by looking at task 2. I think this looks really good. It's really captures exactly what you want to be doing at this stage. And I like what you did with your composition. I think it looks really good the way you sort of pulled things in closer. Um, it's just really the same, I kind of, in a way, the same idea as, when you get, well, not quite the same idea, but when you're like, let's say you're photographing people and you want them to like be closer together because that looks better, in a portrait like with of people, is like having them kind of lean in closer than might not, that might be, not the way we necessarily would stand. But in portraits, it looks really good. And it's sort of the same idea of, in drawing, is sometimes you want to compress the space a little bit more to make it look like everything, belongs together. And in this one, I think, let's go to this drawing. I'm going to just look at it here in Photoshop. So sometimes that can, just gonna maybe do an auto color here. I don't know if that's exactly um, the color of your drawing. You know, some, you guys have the benefit of being able to see your drawing in person, but it looked like maybe um, it was like just missing a little bit of that contrast that you might have had. Like it looked like kind of faded. And yeah, and anyhow, so that was one of the things I might have commented on is without doing that is that maybe you need to add a little bit more dark in your drawing. But I think you actually have a lot of dark, oops, in your drawing. I don't know why. I don't know why that folder opened up. Hold on. Sorry about that. My computer is like on its last legs and it is starting to do some funny things. So, okay, so let's see. Yeah, you know, I think this looks really good. It's I would say the only thing I might look at a little bit more is this area in here. There's something about it that feels like I'm not quite 100% sure what it is. Like what the kind of, is this like the shadow of um, the um, the railing maybe? You might want to clarify that a little bit, just a little bit more in the drawing. And I might even want to add a little, again, this is artistic license, but I might want to add just a little bit more value in the background, just even like a hint of value. So having, because what happens is when you have so much white in the background, um, what happens is our eye naturally starts going to the background. Right? And the background is, you know, a lot of times the backgrounds are, where most of the time, you know, it's like, it is like a backdrop, right? And we put all the time and attention, like, and you certainly have, in all these amazing details here, which must have taken you a lot of time because that's a lot of detail and you did a wonderful job with those. So they seem very accurate and, you know, precise with the elements here. And the staircase as well, which is sort of like in the midground. But so I might kind of blend out the background, add a little more value. You know, I like the idea of the hint of the brick wall. I think that's perfect. So that's all I would really suggest in here. I think, and that might even take care of what's happening here. You know, if this is a shadow, that you might just, you could maybe add that a little bit more, but also sort of blend out the background. Okay, so yeah, otherwise it's really looks good, has a nice fresh quality to it, and really seems very three-dimensional. Hi, Kiara. So I'm not sure if you managed to see my feedback to your previous sketches. One of the things I was a little concerned about is that your drawing is not following the assignment parameters of working with either a still life or a portrait of someone, or you know, an exterior and interior scene. So that's the first thing. The second thing is I would just continue to work a little bit more on the draft phase of working on your sighting of your drawing, just to make sure that you're really trying to get in things accurately. And that's why I think it can be really useful to, like, if you want to just work on a still life, because I know my cat, well, she's sleeping now. I can see her. She does sleep in the same position for a long time, but there is no way I could get her to go back to that same position if I wanted to kind of come back and, you know, continue drawing her another day, because, you know, she's not a person. She doesn't take direction very well. So that's one of the reasons why we were doing this, you know, the criteria that we were. It just makes it a lot easier for you as a drawer. So, you know, maybe you could switch to a portrait if you're working with a portrait. But, you know, then again, working on the sighting a little bit more so you get a kind of more of a clear idea of what's happening, and then setting up your light source, and then starting to work with the values. So just working with the stages as they're laid out in the tasks. And, you know, we do have a few days left, you know, so if you have a few hours, um, I would say in general, just based on my experience teaching in person, that a drawing like this, you can go from, uh, you know, all of the different tasks. You can do all of that in maybe 3 hours, you know, maybe sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less, but that can be like, you can do a pretty polished drawing such as we're doing. So I think if you have that, you know, time, like an evening, you know, today or tomorrow, I might give that a try so they can really just demonstrate all the things that we've been working on throughout this class. And I'm sure that you've got some really, you know, good skills that you've developed. Okay, everybody, thank you so much. This is probably the last time I'm going to be recording, so I really wanted to acknowledge all the hard work you've put into this class. Let's just pull everyone's drawings up again. You know, I know that drawing is not an easy thing. It's one of the harder things we do these days. A lot of times software can seem so much easier. So I appreciate, you know, the courage and the development you've put into working on your drawings.